In the cold, dazzling city of Port Crest, a lonely tech billionaire unexpectedly crosses paths with a 6-year-old black girl cradling her baby brother, asking strangers for milk late at night. Moved by her quiet strength, he offers help, only to uncover an unthinkable truth about her family. What happens next will change their lives forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The city of Port Crest, a sprawling canvas of steel and glass, often hummed with the relentless ambition of its titans. Among them, Elias Vance, a man whose tech empire was valued at a staggering $200 million, found himself walking the deserted sidewalks late one Tuesday night, the cool air doing little to soothe the knot of frustration in his chest. A recent, particularly maddening meeting in the financial district had left him wrestling with figures that stubbornly refused to align, a rare discord in his usually meticulously ordered existence. He was 45, a self-made man accustomed to bending reality to his will, but the abstract numbers of the market felt suddenly, inexplicably out of his grasp. Then a quiet, steady voice sliced through the urban hum, a small but sharp incision in the silence. "Sir, please, I just need some milk for my little brother. I promise I'll pay you when I grow up." Elias stopped, caught off guard. Standing before a modest market, a beacon of harsh fluorescent light against the city's late-night gloom, was a girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She cradled a baby, bundled in faded, patched blankets, her large, dark eyes unwavering, radiating a profound determination that seemed to defy the obvious fragility of her circumstances. There was no whine in her voice, no overt plea for pity, only a solemn, almost businesslike proposition. This wasn't begging, it was a negotiation. He crouched, bringing himself to her level. "What's your name?" "Serafina," she replied, her voice clear. "And this is little Leo." She adjusted the baby gently in her thin arms. "Our mom is very sick and can't go out to buy things." Elias glanced around. It was nearly midnight. The streets were eerily empty, a stark contrast to the daytime chaos, and here was this child, alone, with an infant. Something about the inherent dignity in her simple request, the quiet strength in her gaze, stirred a feeling within him that he couldn't quite articulate. It was an unfamiliar warmth, a prickle of something akin to respect. He pushed open the market door, the bell above chiming softly, startlingly loud in the quiet. Elias had never truly considered the cost of basic necessities. When the cashier stated the price for the milk, a paltry sum that felt absurdly insignificant, yet was clearly an insurmountable barrier for Serafina, he felt a strange, detached embarrassment at his own ignorance. He added a cartload of other items, diapers, jars of baby food, a small bag of apples. Serafina watched each item pass over the scanner, her expression betraying a silent, intricate calculation of an impossible debt. "That's too much, sir. I can't pay for all that." Elias offered a faint smile. "Consider it a long-term investment, Serafina." He handed her the plastic bags, surprisingly heavy. She walked beside him for a couple of blocks, her small steps purposeful, until they paused at the mouth of a dark, narrow alleyway, barely more than a gap between two derelict buildings. "This is it. Thank you, sir." "Elias Vance. Thank you, Mr. Elias. When I grow up, I'll find you and pay you back every penny." Then, with a final, resolute nod, she vanished into the inky blackness with Leo and the groceries. Elias remained rooted to the pavement, a deep disquiet settling over him. A child so young, alone in the pre-dawn hours, carrying an infant, speaking with such composure despite the brutal reality she faced. Without a second thought, he began to follow her, keeping a careful, unnoticed distance. Serafina navigated a desolate, debris-strewn lot, eventually leading Elias to a forgotten underpass where the concrete supports of an old disused rail line formed a makeshift shelter. Beneath its grimy arch, a young woman lay on a bed of flattened cardboard, her body visibly trembling with fever. The sight stole Elias's breath. An entire family enduring the harsh elements, with a 6-year-old girl shouldering the weight of their survival. It was a tableau of profound vulnerability and unexpected resilience. The next morning, Elias returned, laden with more groceries and a small bag of over-the-counter medicines. Serafina's face lit up. "I knew you'd come back." "Mom wants to meet the person who helped us," Serafina added, leading him closer. Clara, the 24-year-old mother, lay weak but alert, her eyes cautious, revealing a deep-seated distrust. She had learned through bitter experience that kindness from strangers, especially men in crisp suits, rarely came without a hidden cost. Yet there was something subtly different about Elias. Perhaps it was the genuine respect he showed Serafina, the way he kept a respectful distance, or the lack of any expectation in his demeanor. "How did you end up here?" Elias asked gently, his voice softer than he usually allowed himself to be. Clara hesitated, her gaze dropping to the worn cardboard beneath her. "We lost our apartment 3 months ago. The landlord said he was cleaning the building of undesirable tenants." Her voice dropped to a near whisper, laden with a quiet pain. "People like us. People like you. Single mothers. Black. No steady income." A cold awareness snaked up Elias's spine. "What about welfare?" Clara hugged Leo closer, her embrace almost desperate. "We tried, but there's always problems with our paperwork, always forms missing, signatures. It's like the system is designed to keep us invisible." Over the following weeks, Elias established a quiet, consistent morning routine at the underpass. Serafina would always be waiting, a small figure brimming with stories of the treasures she had unearthed. Broken dolls, discarded coins, and damp, dog-eared books she painstakingly tried to decipher on her own. "Can you read?" Elias inquired one morning, a children's storybook in hand. "A little," she replied, her large eyes fixed on the cover. "Mom taught me before she got sick." Elias began bringing a steady stream of children's books. Serafina devoured them, as if knowledge itself were sustenance, reading aloud to Leo, even though she knew her little brother was far too young to understand the words. Elias watched, captivated. This was a brilliant mind, he realized, being tragically wasted by the cruelest of circumstances. "Mr. Elias?" Serafina said one cool morning, her voice filled with a child's unfiltered curiosity. "Why do you help us? Everyone else pretends we don't exist." The question landed with the quiet force of a physical blow. Elias paused, then knelt. "Because you're a real family. You take care of each other. You protect each other. You love each other. I have a lot of money, Serafina, but I never had that." Then, with an innocent directness that pierced straight to his core, she offered, "Then maybe we can be your family too?" Something inside Elias shifted. A barrier he hadn't even realized existed began to crack. This tiny girl, who had once promised to repay him for a carton of milk, had just offered him something that his $200 million could never acquire. A place to truly belong. A sense of family that transcended blood or wealth. What Elias didn't know was that their quiet morning ritual, their newfound connection, was being watched. Someone had been observing these visits for weeks, and that person harbored very specific plans to clean up that area of undesirable elements once and for all, plans that threatened everything Elias was beginning to love for the first time in his life. While Serafina weaved elaborate, imaginary tales of brave princesses for Leo, Elias watched the pure, unadulterated love that flowed between them, and he wondered how such extraordinary people could become utterly invisible to the world. What he would soon uncover would not only shatter his perception of Clara's family, but also expose an entire system designed to crush people like them. 3 weeks later, Elias woke with a profound sense of unease, a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. He arrived at the underpass earlier than usual, his usual coffee in hand, but instead of finding Serafina playing with Leo while Clara quietly organized their meager belongings, he was met with a scene that made his blood run cold. Two police officers, their uniforms stark against the dim light, were systematically dousing the cardboard boxes that served as the family's beds with ice-cold water. A third officer, a burly man with a cruel smirk etched on his face, shouted orders with obvious sadism. Clara clutched Leo tightly to her chest, both soaked and shivering, while Serafina desperately tried to salvage the damp pages of the books Elias had given her. "I told you bums don't stay in this area," yelled Sergeant Miller, his voice thick with malicious satisfaction. He clearly relished every second of his abuse of power. "This is private property and you are breaking the law." "Please, Sergeant," Clara pleaded, her voice hoarse and breaking with fever. "We just need a few more days to find another place." "Few days?" Miller sneered, a harsh, humorless laugh escaping his lips. "You've had months. Now get these kids and get out of here before I call Child Protective Services to take you apart." Elias watched, horrified, as Serafina, tiny yet defiant, stared up at the officer 3 times her size with a courage that tore at his heart. "We're not bums," the 6-year-old declared, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "We're a family, and we're taking care of each other." Miller crouched down, a chilling, predatory grin spreading across his face. "You know what happens to kids who are too smart. They end up far away from their mothers, in places where they learn to keep quiet." Clara instinctively pulled Serafina back, terror evident in her eyes. Elias saw a woman who had, over time, learned precisely how cruel and unyielding the system could be to decent people like her. "Decent people don't live under bridges," Miller growled, adjusting his gun belt with a deliberate, menacing click. "And children don't grow up here, if I can help it." With that, the officers turned and walked away, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. Elias approached the distraught family. For the first time since he had known her, he saw Serafina truly weep, clutching the wet, mangled pieces of the books he had given her. Her small voice, broken by sobs, asked, "They destroyed everything, Mr. Elias. Why?" Elias crouched, gently wiping away her tears. "Because some people think they can mistreat those who can't defend themselves." "Mr. Elias," Clara whispered, still shaking uncontrollably. "This happens twice a week. Always the same officer. He says we're polluting the neighborhood and threatens to separate us." "He can do that?" Clara looked around nervously, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. "People like us, the system doesn't work for us. He has a badge, we have nothing." A cold, calculating resolve began to solidify in Elias's mind. "Clara?" he asked, his voice steady. "Can I ask you some questions about this officer? And how you lost your apartment?" Clara looked at him, puzzled. "Why?" "Because I suspect you're not the only victims." That afternoon, Elias canceled all his meetings. His mind, usually sharp and focused on billion-dollar deals, was now consumed by a new, unexpected purpose. He placed a call to Evelyn Thorne, a civil rights lawyer renowned for bringing down corrupt police departments. Then he contacted Gabrielle Rivera, a private investigator specializing in municipal corruption, whose name had appeared on several investigative journalism pieces. "It's a well-known pattern," Gabriel explained, his voice gravelly over the phone, after Elias recounted the harrowing scene at the underpass. "Vulnerable families are systematically evicted from areas marked for gentrification. The trick is to use cops like Miller to do the dirty work." "Dirty work for whom?" Elias asked, his jaw tight. "Sterling Properties," Gabriel confirmed, naming a major real estate development firm in Portcrest. "They buy land at ridiculously low prices after the area is cleaned up of undesirable elements." Elias felt a slow, simmering anger rise in his throat, sharper and more potent than any frustration he'd ever felt in a boardroom. "And what does Miller get in return?" "Extra bonuses for every family that voluntarily relocates," Gabrielle stated, the cynicism evident in his tone. "We've been able to track 15 families forced out in the last 6 months alone." While his team meticulously built the case, Elias continued his visits to Clara and the children. Serafina had lost her natural ebullience. She no longer ran to greet him, but merely waved timidly from a distance, her movements subdued. Mr. Elias, she said one quiet afternoon, her gaze distant. Mom said we might have to leave town. Well, he asked, his voice gentle. Because the man in uniform said that if we don't go away, he'll make me and Leo go to different homes, far away from Mom. Elias felt something twist inside him. He crouched, meeting her eye level. Serafina, do you trust me? Yeah. Then believe me when I say that no one will ever separate you. Never. How can you be sure? She asked, her small voice full of a child's desperate hope. Elias smiled, but there was a dangerous glint in his eyes, a steely resolve that few ever saw. Because people like Sergeant Miller are only brave against those they think can't fight back. They've never faced anyone with my resources. Clara approached, listening to the conversation, her brow furrowed with concern. Mr. Elias, we don't want you getting into trouble because of us. Clara, Elias interrupted, his voice firm, I have $200 million and lawyers who make Miller look like a playground amateur. The problem isn't me taking him on, it's him picking the wrong family to bully. That night, Elias was in his penthouse office, the city lights a glittering tapestry below, when Evelyn called. Elias, we found something big. Miller isn't just evicting families, he's using false records to justify confiscating children and selling them to private adoption agencies. Elias gripped the phone, his knuckles white. How many children? 12 in the last 2 years, all from vulnerable Black or Latino families. Elias clenched his fists, a cold, burning fury igniting within him. This wasn't just about illegal evictions. This was about deliberately ripping families apart to profit from human suffering. Evelyn, how long do we need to build a federal case? With your resources, 2 weeks. And to secure immediate protection for Clara and the children, I can arrange that tomorrow. Elias looked out the panoramic window towards the distant, forgotten underpass, where his new family slept on damp cardboard. In 2 weeks, Miller and his superiors would discover they had messed with the wrong family. What they didn't know was that Elias Vance had spent 20 years building an empire through ruthless strategy and unlimited resources, and now, for the first time in his life, he had a motivation that went far beyond profit. As Serafina finally drifted to sleep in Clara's arms that night, still haunted by Miller's harsh shouts, Elias prepared for a war. A war that would prove that sometimes the oppressors chose the wrong victims, and when that happened, revenge would come with surgical precision and infinite resources. Sometimes, powerful people like Miller forgot that in a world where money was power, there were people with enough power to rewrite all the rules of the game. What he would soon discover was that he had poked not just a vulnerable family, but a sleeping giant with 200 million reasons to wake up. The next morning, Elias woke with a profound calmness he hadn't felt in years. As he sipped his coffee in his penthouse, he didn't dwell on financial reports or the day's meetings. His mind was laser-focused on something infinitely more important, completely dismantling the lives of those who profited from the suffering of children. At 7 o'clock, Evelyn Thorne arrived at Elias's office, carrying 3 thick folders brimming with documents. "We got much more than we expected," she announced, spreading papers across the polished mahogany table. "Miller isn't just corrupt, he's careless. He left digital footprints everywhere." Gabriel Rivera entered shortly after, carrying professional recording equipment. "The cameras we installed captured Miller making explicit threats against at least 8 different families," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "But the best is yet to come." Elias leaned back in his chair, a rare, almost predatory glint in his eyes. "Go on." "Miller has a private group chat with other officers," Evelyn explained, a cold smile playing on her lips. "They literally bet on how many families they can clean up each week. We have screenshots of everything. They call the children premium products, because wealthy families pay more for small babies. Serafina and Leo were next on the list." Elias felt a chill colder than any Port Crest winter run up his spine. This was beyond illegal evictions. It was institutionalized kidnapping. "How much evidence do we have?" "Enough to take down the entire department, potentially," Gabriel replied. "But you said you wanted something more personal." "Exactly," Elias affirmed. Miller is going to learn that there are consequences for threatening my family." While Elias meticulously planned Miller's downfall, the officer continued his routine of terror. That afternoon he showed up at the underpass, accompanied by a woman Elias didn't even know existed, a corrupt social worker. "Mrs. Clara," the woman said, her voice cloyingly sweet, a fake smile plastered across her face. "I'm Brenda Wallace from Child Protective Services. We've received reports of parental neglect." Clara instinctively hugged Leo tighter, her eyes wide with terror. "My children are well cared for." "Sleeping in the open isn't caring," Miller interrupted sadistically, his voice laced with contempt. "Children need stable homes, not mothers who can't even pay rent." Serafina, who had been playing nearby, ran to her mother, her small face etched with fear. "Mommy, are they going to take us away?" Brenda Wallace knelt, her rehearsed smile unwavering. "Honey, we only want what's best for you and your little brother. There are wonderful families waiting to give you the love and stability you deserve." "I have love and stability," Serafina retorted with a fierce courage that broke Clara's heart. "I have Mommy and Leo and Mr. Elias." Miller laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "That rich man who shows up here, he'll get tired of you soon, just like he always does. Men like him don't really care about people like you." What Miller didn't know was that every word, every cruel laugh, was being recorded in high definition by the discreet cameras Elias had installed. More importantly, he had just made the fatal mistake of completely underestimating his true opponent. That night, Elias received the day's recordings. He watched Miller mock Serafina, threaten Clara, talk about premium products as if children were mere merchandise. For the first time in years, Elias felt something his business competitors knew well: cold, calculated rage. "Evelyn," he called at 11 that night, his voice devoid of any warmth, "I want you to file a federal complaint first thing in the morning. Human trafficking, corruption, civil rights violations, everything." "What about the family? Miller might try something desperate when he realizes he's under investigation." Elias smiled, but there was something dangerous in that smile, a chilling premonition of retribution. "The family will be safe, because tomorrow they're moving into my house." "Elias, are you sure? This could complicate the case." "I'm not asking for permission, Evelyn," Elias stated, his voice unwavering. "I'm informing you of my decision." The next morning, Elias arrived at the underpass with two of Evelyn's top lawyers, a spacious moving truck, and temporary guardianship papers already prepared. Clara looked at him in utter confusion as he calmly explained the situation. "Mr. Elias, we can't accept this. It's too much." "Clara," Elias interrupted gently, his gaze firm. "In 48 hours, Miller will find out that he messed with the wrong family. When that happens, you need to be somewhere safe." Serafina tugged at his sleeve, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and lingering fear. "Mr. Elias, will you really protect us from the bad man?" Elias crouched, meeting her gaze. "Serafina, do you trust me?" "Yes," she whispered. "Then believe me when I say that the bad man will never bother you again, or any other family." Clara saw something in Elias's eyes that both reassured her and worried her at the same time. There was unwavering determination, certainly, but also something darker, something fiercely protective that people like Miller would never expect to find in a successful entrepreneur. As the family gathered their few belongings, Elias received a message from Gabriel. "Miller just posted in the group that he got 2 more products marked for collection. He really thinks he's winning." Elias typed a quick reply. "Let him think that. Tomorrow he'll learn the difference between bullying defenseless families and taking on someone with unlimited resources and federal lawyers." For a moment, as he carried Leo to the waiting car, Elias reflected on the strange irony that his life had been so completely upended by a little girl simply asking for milk in the middle of the night. But looking at Serafina, holding Clara's hand as they approached the vehicle, he knew with absolute certainty that he would do it all again. What Miller didn't comprehend was that he had just transformed a successful businessman into something far more formidable, a protective father with $200 million and absolutely no limits when it came to defending his family. 48 hours later, Sergeant Miller woke up believing it would be just another routine day of cleaning up the streets of Port Crest. He had no idea he was about to experience the last day of his career, and quite possibly, his freedom. At 8 o'clock, his phone buzzed with an urgent call from Captain Rojas. "Miller, I need you to come to the station immediately. We have a delicate situation." When he arrived, he found Rojas looking grim. 3 internal affairs officers, 2 federal agents, and, to his utter bewilderment, Evelyn Thorne, the most feared civil rights lawyer in the city, were waiting. "Officer Miller," the captain began, his voice strained, "do you know Miss Thorne by reputation?" "Yes, sir," Miller replied, trying to keep his voice steady, but already feeling a cold sweat prickling his back. Evelyn activated a tablet, turning the screen toward him. "Do you recognize these images?" Miller's blood ran cold. It was him, in high definition, pouring ice water on Clara's belongings, threatening to separate the children, using intimidating language against a defenseless family. The recordings had crystal-clear audio of every cruel word he had uttered. "Where did you get this?" His voice came out louder than he intended. "Security cameras, legally installed in a public area." Evelyn smiled, a chilling, triumphant expression. "But that's just the appetizer." She swiped to the next video. Miller watched in horror as his own unmistakable voice confessed to other officers that he received extra bonuses for relocating undesirable elements. Conversations he thought were private, now broadcast with professional quality. 52 families, Sergeant Miller." One of the federal agents, Agent Thompson from the FBI, leaned forward, his gaze piercing. 52 families you terrorized and illegally evicted over the last 18 months. We're investigating allegations of human trafficking, extortion, and systematic civil rights violations. Your name comes up on all of them." Miller felt his legs give way. "Human trafficking? I never—" Evelyn cut him off, playing an audio clip from a phone conversation. Miller's unmistakable voice echoed through the room. "I managed to get 2 more premium products for pickup. The girl is 6 years old, perfect for those rich families who want little babies. The boy is also usable, premium product." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her expression one of utter disdain. "Is that what you call children, Sergeant?" Captain Rojas shook his head in disgust. 23 years of service, Miller. How did you get to this point?" But Miller was barely listening. His mind raced, desperately trying to comprehend how everything had unraveled so quickly. Then, Evelyn showed him the next piece of evidence, screenshots from the group chat where he and other officers openly gambled on how many families they could expel each week. "But you can't clear 5 bums by Friday," Evelyn read aloud from one message. "I won. I separated 2 kids yesterday, double commission this month." A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. Miller watched his career, his pension, his entire life evaporating before his eyes. "Who's behind this?" Agent Thompson asked, his voice low and deliberate. "Because we know you didn't organize this operation alone." Miller hesitated, but Evelyn played another recording, him talking about orders from above and the Sterling Project. "Derfling Properties," Evelyn stated, her voice cutting through the tension. $16 million in fraudulent municipal contracts. You used psychological terror to drive families out, then the company bought their land for next to nothing. Agent Thompson placed a tape recorder on the table. "Sergeant Miller, you have the right to an attorney, but if you cooperate now, we may be able to work something out." That's when the door opened, and Elias Vance entered the room, carrying a briefcase. Miller recognized him immediately. The sentimental businessman who visited the family under the underpass. "Sorry I'm late," Elias said calmly, his gaze settling on Miller. "I was finishing up the last details of the investigation." Miller felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. You were documenting every crime you've committed," Elias confirmed, opening a folder filled with meticulously organized documents, "including these recorded conversations with your superiors at Sterling." He played audio from a meeting where company executives openly discussed how to use Miller and other police officers to clean up problem areas before land acquisitions. "The important thing is that it looks legal," Sterling's CEO's voice echoed through the room. "Miller knows how to pressure these families without leaving an official trail." Miller sank into his chair, utterly defeated. This wasn't just police abuse, it was a criminal conspiracy involving millions of dollars. "Mr. Vance," Agent Thompson said, his voice laced with awe, "what exact role did you play in this investigation?" Elias smiled, but there was something dangerous in that smile, a quiet triumph. "When I saw Sergeant Miller threaten a family I consider my own, I decided to use my resources to find out exactly who I was dealing with." Evelyn added, "Mr. Vance funded a 6-month investigation that exposed a corruption ring worth $50 million in misappropriated public funds." Miller finally understood the full magnitude of what had happened. He hadn't just intimidated a vulnerable family. He had unknowingly picked the wrong one protected by someone with unlimited resources and absolute determination. "Sergeant Miller," Elias said, approaching the table, his voice low and firm, "do you remember what you said to Serafina on her last day? That men like me get tired of people like her?" Miller nodded weakly, his eyes fixed on Elias. "You were right about one thing," Elias continued. "I did get tired. Tired of seeing innocent children terrorized by people who were supposed to protect them." Elias placed more documents on the table. Offshore bank accounts, suspicious transfers, fraudulent contracts. 3 years of evidence proving that Miller and his superiors had turned child protection into a human trafficking pipeline. Captain Rojas stood up, his face grim with cold fury. "Sergeant Miller, you are suspended immediately. You will be charged with extortion, human trafficking, corruption, and systematic violation of civil rights." Miller tried to speak but could only whisper, "How did you get all this?" Elias leaned forward, his voice a quiet, powerful pronouncement. "You completely underestimated who you were fighting. You thought you were dealing with a defenseless family and a naive businessman." Evelyn added, "Mr. Vance has $200 million, a team of 15 specialized lawyers, and private investigators in 3 states. You picked the wrong opponent." As Miller was led out of the room in handcuffs, Elias spoke to Agent Thompson, his voice already moving on to the next phase of his mission. "Agent, I have more evidence on the other officers involved and how Sterling used social housing funds to finance private projects." That afternoon, as news of the largest anti-corruption operation in Port Crest history dominated every channel, Elias was at home, watching Serafina teach Leo to draw crude flowers in the sprawling garden of his penthouse. "Mr. Elias," Serafina asked, looking up from her colorful creation, "will the bad man never bother anyone again?" "Never again, sweetheart," Elias replied, his voice soft. "Neither him nor the people who made him do bad things." Clara approached, holding a cup of coffee, a newfound peace settling on her features. "Elias, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me for protecting my family," he interrupted gently, his gaze encompassing all 3 of them. Serafina looked up from her drawing, her eyes wide with wonder. "Are we really his family?" Elias crouched down beside her, his heart swelling. "You're the only real family I've ever had." As the sun began to set over Port Crest, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elias reflected on the profound irony of his life. A simple question, "Sir, I need milk for my little brother," had completely rewritten his existence. Serafina had taught him that family wasn't something you acquired, it was something you chose, and when someone threatened that chosen family, he discovered that protection was priceless. Sometimes, powerful people forgot that there were even more powerful people watching, and when those people decided to act, justice didn't just come as punishment. It came as a complete transformation of reality. Miller thought he was going after a vulnerable family, but he was actually waking up a sleeping giant who would rewrite the rules of the game forever. 6 months later, Elias woke to the sound of joyous laughter drifting from the garden. Through his window he saw Serafina teaching Leo to take his first wobbly steps on the manicured lawn, while Clara, humming softly, planted vibrant flowers she had chosen specifically to match her daughter's drawings. "Daddy, Elias!" Serafina shouted, running toward him as he appeared at the terrace door. The word "daddy" still made his heart pound with a profound, intoxicating warmth every single time he heard it. Clara smiled, wiping dirt from her hands. "She's insisted on calling you that ever since you signed the adoption papers." Elias crouched, pulling Serafina into a tight embrace. "And I insist that it's the most beautiful word I've ever heard." Sergeant Miller, meanwhile, had discovered that justice possessed a long memory and surgical precision. Sentenced to 15 years in a federal prison for human trafficking and corruption, he spent his first months trying, in his stark cell, to comprehend how a seemingly sentimental businessman had completely dismantled his life in a matter of weeks. In the same prison where many of the families he had separated visited their children in foster homes, Miller learned that reputation was like crystal. Once shattered, it could never be restored to its original state. Sterling Properties had all its contracts canceled, faced a staggering $120 million in federal fines, and its executives discovered that attempting to profit from human suffering cost much more than money. It cost freedom. "Mr. Elias," Serafina said one afternoon, as she helped prepare dinner in Elias's expansive kitchen, her small hands deftly peeling vegetables. "My teacher asked me what I want to be when I grow up." "And what did you say?" Elias asked, pausing his own chopping. "I said I want to help other families like ours," she replied, her eyes bright with earnest conviction. "Families that people pretend don't exist." Elias stopped cutting vegetables and looked at the 6-year-old girl who had so completely upended his life. "You know you can be anything you want, right?" "Yes," she affirmed. "But I want to be just like you. Someone who uses his power to protect those who need it." Clara, who was listening from the table where she was feeding Leo, smiled, a deep, genuine smile. "She's right, Elias. You taught us that family isn't about blood. It's about choosing to care for one another." That night, as he tucked Serafina into bed in her room, now filled with books and colorful drawings, Elias reflected on the profound irony of life. He had spent 45 years accumulating immense wealth, believing it would bring him happiness, only to discover that true abundance arrived when a little girl simply asked him for milk for her little brother. "Daddy Elias," Serafina whispered sleepily, her hand reaching for his. "Thank you for choosing us as your family. Thank you for teaching me what family truly means, my princess." 6 months after the trial, Elias received a surprising call. It was from the mayor of Portcrest, inviting him to create a municipal family protection program that would prevent other children from enduring the injustices Serafina had faced. "I accept," Elias replied without hesitation. "But I have one condition." "What is it?" the mayor asked. "I want Serafina to cut the ribbon at the opening. She taught me that protecting families isn't charity, it's a fundamental responsibility." On the day of the Serafina Family Protection Center's grand opening, hundreds of people gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and profound respect, to witness a 6-year-old girl cut the ribbon on a project that would transform thousands of lives across the city. Elias watched from the back, holding a content Leo on his lap, while Clara held Serafina's free hand. "Mommy," Serafina whispered to Clara, just before the decisive snip, "are we helping other families not go through what we went through?" "We are, my princess," Clara replied, her voice thick with emotion. "And it's all because you had the courage to ask for help from someone who could make a difference." When the cameras caught Elias subtly wiping tears from his eyes at that moment, everyone present understood. This story wasn't just about a millionaire saving a family. It was about a family saving a man who had everything, except what truly mattered. Miller, watching the news from his prison cell, finally comprehended the lesson that had cost him his freedom. When you choose to terrorize the defenseless, you sometimes discover that they aren't as defenseless as they seem. Elias Vance learned that true wealth wasn't measured in millions of dollars, but in the sound of laughter in his backyard, in heartfelt hugs, and in the certainty that someone was running to him shouting, "Daddy," when he came home. And Serafina, the quiet, determined little girl, she learned that sometimes, when you possessed the courage to simply ask for help, you found not only what you needed, but something far more valuable than you could ever have dreamed of. The little girl who promised to pay for milk when she grew up ended up paying with something infinitely more precious. She taught a lost man that family was the only true wealth, that endlessly multiplied when shared. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.